It's a pleasure to have you with us this evening. I welcome you to the third episode of The World is Talking, brought to you by Inspirectuals in association with Rogue Leadership. Today we have our special guest with us, someone who has been a great personality in the professional speaking community, person who has traveled diversely across several sectors and has been a renowned management consultant. He has been a great person. So I'll give you an official introduction as we begin this event. But he's played a key role in my life, in shaping my career as well. So I'm thankful to Dr. Suman Mukerjee for joining on this special occasion with me.
Good evening, viewers, and thank you, Chahat. It's great to be on show.
Great. So I'll officially introduce Dr. Suman Mukerjee to you. Dr. Suman Mukerjee has more than 46 years of teaching and research experience in India and abroad, which includes being a professor at XLRI Jamshedpur, IISWBM as a professor, St. Xavier's College, Calcutta, IIT Delhi, SRCC Delhi, Newcastle Business School, UK, Sellinger School of Business and Management, USA, and also the former director of Calcutta Business School, along with being the former principal and dean of Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan Institute of Management Science in Calcutta. He is a Xaverian, a Stephanian, and an alumnus of Delhi School of Economics. And Dr. Suman has participated in many prestigious inter-college debate competitions, international conferences, and seminars. Just to share with you, he has won more than 75 events in his leadership, and he has founded some of the renowned debating clubs across the country, including being the ideator of Calcutta Club National Debate, or being the ideator for the St. Stephen's College Debate, or the Nihil Ultra, for that matter, St. Xavier's College Calcutta Debate Team. He is a fellow of All India Management Association, member of Indo-British Scholars Association. He was also invited as an international observer at Bill Clinton White House Conference of Small Businesses at Washington in 1995. It is my pleasure to have Dr. Suman Mukerjee on my show, The World is Talking today, and it's going to be an interesting event where we will discuss, on the shifting priorities in business. Lots to brainstorm on, and I'm sure this could not have been a better time to discuss such an important topic. So, thank you so much, Dr. Suman, for your precious time.
It's very embarrassing to have that introduction. I mean, it's easier if you just keep talking.
Yeah. So, thanks again. Thanks, viewers, for joining in from different parts of the world. Just to share with you, at this point, we are live on our official Inspirectuals page. If any of you who've missed in joining on this Zoom broadcast, you may have the viewing of this special event from the Facebook page itself. Just to begin with, officially with the talk show, the topic is shifting priorities in business. I want to understand from Dr. Suman Mukerjee that you've been a legend in the management industry with almost more than 5 decades of experience. And looking at your long and influential career, I'm very curious to know today from you, how have businesses evolved over the years that we have seen, and most importantly, since the time you have took your first step in the corporate world? You can tell us the headwinds and tailwinds both.
It's very surprising that when you talk about even contemporary India, you have several economies in one. You still have tribal societies, you have towns, you have semi-urban societies, you have the most modern cities and ultra-modern places. So depending on your situation, your habitat, your business operations change. So if I were to take Colin Clark's theory, we've moved from the nomadic tribe, which is still there, prevalent in in parts of the country in India, to the pastoral, to agricultural, for subsistence orientation, to that of market economy, which is both manufacture and partly also into circular economy. I'll come to that later. But you have, it's not a clean breed that, as it were, as you would find in a developed country. You have quite a lot of variety in India. And fortunately, this is a great country because all these types of existence are parallelly, possibly existing in India. The prime mover, we talk about land labor capital organization, but the prime mover, I would say, is technology. And technology requires education. But if you got to move from subsistence-oriented economy to a market-oriented economy, then one of the most important things that you need is, as Robert Solow, the Nobel laureate, would have said, 90% of economic growth depends on technology. So no technology, no growth. So what is changing the growth process is the change and the evolution of technology. Even in the most modern sectors, as you can see, it was essentially a story of trying to communicate. Let's take radios, the valve radios. Then we moved on to transistors. Then we had compact discs. And then we have the pen drives. And now we've gone to the MP3. And the whole foray of communication has become cheaper and not more expensive, and it perhaps reaches out even further. So whereas a letter would take 3 months across the seas, today it's just instantly there. I am with you in two different parts of the country, and we are communicating with others interactively. So that tells you how business has changed from myopic areas. It's moved on to macro and now global, and we are even looking at space as an opportunity. I know of people buying land on the moon. So it wouldn't be, perhaps in my own lifetime, I would be talking to people on the moon. Yeah. So that's as fast as business can change. But as I said, the bottom line is technology. The faster the technology, more an R&D, and it's driven by basically not just greed. It starts as a prime mover from need, but moves on to greed, moves on to efficiency, efficacy, and better utilization of the resources, because you're looking at profitability. So on one hand, you're looking at lowering costs. On the other hand, you're improving the reachability as well as the efficacy of utilization. So it's actually looking into a kaleidoscope with every twitch of the hand, where the three mirrors are perspective, where you are, and your situation, which is history and geography, and the third is, of course, your want. What are you looking at? What's your vision? What's your mission? And that will change the perspective of whatever you do. But beyond it all comes the spiritual you. What is it that you want? When you cannot preach the importance of materialism to a sadhu, for instance, an aesthetic who's given up life. So if your want and needs and aspirations change, so does your demand. And with your change in demand comes the change in perspective. Having said that, let me also add, your demand is not within your control. If I were to strike a light, let's say a candle in a dark room, and bring in a moth there, the moth would get dazzled by the glitter of that light, and go and get singed in that light. So the point is, do you have a mind of your own? Can you really think in terms of what you want? Or are you just following a mirage, an expectation? Are you in control of your destiny? Are you keeping up with the Joneses? Or you're just wanting something which you've seen in a country where it's achieved? Marxists have a very interesting point here. It's a question of, if you have a low level of living, then you have low self-esteem because you think anything in this country is not worth it. Look at what other countries have done. And when you have a low level of esteem, then you have limited freedom. Your thought gets conditioned by what you've seen and not what you should be wanting. So in a hot climate, you would be wanting carpets, which is needed in a Western world where it gets really cold. But there are parts in India, particularly in the seaside, where you don't need carpets, but it's an expression, it's a style state. Our dressing, our pattern, our idea of music, what we like, everything seems to be borrowed and are alien to us if you're a poor country, if you're a developing nation. It's only when it comes to a developed nation, Indian music is wanted, Indian yoga is wanted, Indian thought process is wanted, Indian culture and religion is wanted because somebody else has found it good. So, do you have the independence of mind with an inner search to know what you want? So, whereas I'm raising this issue, I'm also telling you, by controlling your mind, I can control your demand, and I don't need to have a foreign flag fluttering over my head. I need to control your mind, and I've sucked into your demand and got you to behave the way I want to. So the freedom of choice is not as free as you think it is what you're made to think. And that's something that comes from another element. How much do you know about yourself? Do you introspect beyond your physical self? Do you understand your metaphysical self? Do you realize what's going to happen to you after you're not there? How would you write your obituary? What are you now? What do you want to be? Do you have your own compass needle pointing to a direction, or have you actually borrowed a compass from somebody else? So, extremely important issues these. It can go on for hours, but when you talk about what are the business ideas, it will largely depend on which class of people, which section of people are you looking at business ideas for. For a nomad, he does not need the kind of clothes that you're wearing. For instance, lungis, the gamchas, the hotuas are what you get in the villages. Whereas in cities, we would be very happy to wear sweatshirts, jeans, white shoes, and it gives you a sense of arrival, and I've arrived. So everything is conditioning of your mind, and to a large extent, conditioning your thought. And this is exactly where the world of advertisement is settled. So I suck into your mind to say, behave and think this way, and then I don't have to politically dominate you. So very interesting thoughts, but that's true. So your business ideas would be, what have you been able to sell? What ideas have you been able to perpetuate? What are the necessary wants that you've been able to create? So from Ayurvedic medicine, you might be looking at the latest nuclear medicines to cure ailments. So with change, technology comes in. The prime driver of technology is your want and aspiration. And so business ideas change and possibilities change. And it's not changing by just seeing and believing. It's changing because you want to follow a leader, a country which has done better than you, and you think that is the mecca of happiness. That's life. So there is a material journey. There's also an inner science of an inward journey. And India has been known, for that matter, even China and Egypt had been known to take these inward journeys. But today we are more or less settling down for the same common wants, desires, cultures, and occasionally you have something like a COVID thrown in, and then you're caught with your pants down that what you think you can control is not quite controllable.
Very well summed up, I never expected such insights, that too when you've beautifully correlated the business angle to the spiritual side. You've talked about, the material aspect as well as the inward aspect of, the human journey that we experience, and that too in such unprecedented times, So you've talked about efficiency, you've talked about efficacy. My audience really want to know from you today that, what is the core difference between efficiency and effectiveness? This is two terms which most of the people are often confused with. So I'm sure that you can throw some light on that.
For a typical economic student, I will distinguish between Pareto optimal situation, where you're looking at efficiency, actually allocating resources exactly in terms of their productivity and prices, versus what is a socially most desirable choice. Now, it might surprise you to know that the most efficient society need not be the best society. The most effective society is one which caters to your welfare needs. So when I'm talking about efficacy, it is about whether you're satisfying the majority demand in a better way rather than doing it more productively and cost effective. So there are two journeys. You can become efficient, and of course that would lead to more profits, and more profits would lead to a larger cake size. And if your cake size is not large, then you can't have a large party. But on the other hand, you can't distribute just a pastry amongst hundreds of people where they get crumbs and expect happiness. On the other hand, you can even suggest that why do I need a pastry in the first place? Fasting can also be a good way to reduce and come to terms with yourself. Now, when I'm talking about efficacy, it is how well a society is adjusted to its needs. Whether you're addressing the majority of the problems, and social welfare is not necessarily maximized where efficiency is most. So we have to draw the balance between for whom do we produce and how do we produce. So when you ask the second question, for whom, it will be strange to call the process growth when majority of the people are not enjoying that benefit. Now, to give you a standard example, if a person gets filaria and he's got a thick growth on his leg, he weighs more. Does it mean he's a happier person? So rising GDP is not necessarily a good indicator that things are going right. It just says you're more weighty, you produced more. Does per capita income give you a good indicator because it tells you what's the average income? And I would say even that doesn't, because your distribution can be highly skewed. 90% of your people might be just getting 10% of your resources, as indeed we have in India. So who's enjoying the fruits of the labor of a higher productivity? In that case, the question is, how do we distribute the cake? So on one hand, we have to think in terms of the cake size. On the other hand, we'll have to think in terms of the knife. And that is, how do we distribute it? And wherever we go for a difference between the two, the cake size and the knife distribution, I am getting an efficient society, no doubt, with a larger cake, but I'm not getting equity, and therefore I'm not maximizing social welfare. So when you're talking about efficacy, you're talking about whether it's actually bringing to ground greater happiness and making it more acceptable to the masses.
Yeah. So, just to add on to that, I would want to bring a very important topic, which is money. Very, very often people do say that money is very important, and people these days, it's a rat race, competitive environment. People run after money. So, what are your thoughts? How do you see money? According to me, money just acts as a fuel. But yes, money is imperative to keep you going. But, why do businesses need to make profits? The core essence of making profits is not just to feed yourself. It also should be to, bring greater good to the society. It's about welfare. And it's actually about how are you utilizing that money to give back to the society. So in that way, when people say, is money important? Yes, money is important. Money acts as a fuel, but that has to be for the greater good, where we are, working hand in hand, improving the quality of lives for each other. So, I want to know from you, my audience wants to know on the World is Talking Show forum, that what are your thoughts on money being an an important criterion for people's way of life?
Your question is the kernel of, I'd say, the heart of economics. There are two thoughts on economics. There is one school of thought which is known as the Keynesian school, which would say money is an illusion. Money is just a lubricant. It helps you to run your machine well. It cannot be a good wanted for its own sake. It's not like wheat or milk or eggs. It can't be wanted for its own sake. And you're quite foolish to say, let me have a lot of money, because it's just a medium of exchange. It's a lubricant. On the other hand, the other school would say, well, if there is this feeling that more money means I'm richer and gives you the feeling and the euphoria to say that let me go ahead, why not push in some money into the economy, create more supplies, increase income, increase demand, and justify the use of money. The basic purpose of money is to see that the growth process is hastened. So it is just a lubricant, but it's not a good like you would like a Cadbury's chocolate. But many people want that freedom. In fact, if I go back to Keynes, there are three basic motives that people play by. One is the transactions motive. To buy goods, you need money. Precautionary motive. You need money to save goods. But the most important part, which is now playing a very important role, and people are enriching themselves on that, is the stock market. But for stock market, you must have idle hordes. And with the idle hordes, what are you doing? You're trying to read the future. You're trying to speculate about the future. And you think you can outsmart others. You can buy shares. And without any productive investment, you're enriching yourself by parking your funds in the right kind of stock, and you're getting richer because you're using idle hordes, which is not really going into production. Some of it may leak into equity participation, but most of it is on speculative design, where you're trying to read what the price of the bond would be, the share would be, and you're trying to push it up with your speculative activities. So, and the fact is, people do have this illusion of money. People do believe that speculation is their fundamental right. So I should have a right to foresee the future and use my resources and acumen to see that I better my future. So now when you refer to profits, a very important question arises. Profit is actually an outcome of the difference between revenue and quantity. If it is that, then I need to look at what is that source of revenue. Price into quantity? Is it price or is it quantity? If it is price, then no individual can claim merit for making profits. It is socially, institutionally, and market-wise determined. It's a quantity that should be given credit to. Similarly, I can also increase profits by reducing costs, which is efficiency. So when I say I've made more profits, it's not necessarily a good thing that has happened. Like I give you the example of filaria giving you more weight. The same is the story with profit making. Where's the source of profit? Did it come through productivity? Have you employed more? Have you produced more? Or has it come by market cornering, market capturing, foreclosing capacity, creating shortages, hoarding, or putting your funds into the kind of things which are likely to escalate and therefore enriched yourself? So rise in profit is not necessarily an improvement in your welfare. That's a very fundamental question. So what then is? That's the question that you should be saying. When my decision is actually impacting more on not just the people and consumers, but even their players. For instance, my workers, are they happier? Is the attrition rate going up or going down? I could refer to several profitable industries, let's say the IT sector, which pays you so profitably. Then the question arises, why is the attrition rate so high? So you cannot be saying, I'm better off because my salary is better off. So the question is, what is the future of your existence in a company? Where does loyalty go? Where does your tenure of work with that company goes? So there's a Japanese style of management where you actually go up the rungs of the ladder, and there's the Western style of management where you shift jobs or change jobs for anybody who gives you a better price. So you're actually in a bidder's market and offering yourself like a good to say, will you pay me more? So it's a pick me up model rather than I've served you, so can I go up more? The same is true about governance. When you're looking at governance, the Anglo-American style would be there's a huge gap between the CEO and the lowest rung of the worker. Even if I take not the communist, but a European style of management, the gap between the CEO and the lowest worker is almost 1/16 as much as it is in the other capital. So as Galbraith once pointed out, who's the CEO to give himself this gratis of saying, I deserve this salary? So when you're talking about money and you're talking about profits and you're talking about shares, these are the very complicated areas of governance that needs to be looked into. Who determines your share of the profits, your share of the output, and at the national level, international level, the same thing happens. If a country goes in for a deficit, you box the ears and say, okay, devalue. For instance, India. How many of us would remember that when we started Indian planning, 1 rupee was equal to $1 or thereabouts. Today, 74 rupees is equal to $1. Why? Because surprisingly, our rupee has depreciated, deteriorated in its value because of single most reason, we are importing more than what we are exporting. If so, then $1 million question that arises is, the largest deficit-making nation in the world is USA. How come nobody asks USA to devalue? And the answer to that is, your own resources are held in dollars. So it will be like Kalidas knocking off the very branch you sit on to say that devalue your currency. So you'd be a fool to say that. And if you want to convert the dollars into some other form of asset holding, then whether it's bronze or silver or gold, look at the way the gold prices have gone up, real asset prices have gone up. That's another story. So the question is, profit for what? Is that the indicator of happiness? Is that the indicator of things are going happy? Are we saying losses are good? No, we are saying there's another way of looking at the entire style, your productivity. Are your costs going up? Are you employing more? Are you making things more efficient? So you could be comparing profitability with productivity. And public sector, in many companies, started with Russia, we in India also believed in that. To a large extent, even the welfare state UK wanted to believe in that, is based on the principles of productivity. Make it more meaningful for the factors that you engage and the people that you address your production. So when you're talking about businesses, the basic question that arises is, what is your objective? To make profit, reach out, increase your market share, make more meaningful, again back to efficiency and efficacy. What are you producing? Why are you producing? At what price are you producing? And who's benefiting from your effort?
So very well put forward, Dr. Suman. You've mentioned that one should have their objectives clear when they start off their business, right? Minting profits, minting money is important for any business, but one should look at the larger picture of serving the society. And you have put forward in terms of bringing up the economics angle to that. So moving on to the next question, Dr. Suman. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought fast-moving and unexpected variables, some of which existing crisis plans and teams weren't prepared to handle. In your view, how should companies successfully develop such plans to look ahead and prepare to deliver more? The problem with most of the companies is they kind of promise more and deliver less. So it's very important for organizations to start delivering more and promising less, but in fact one should over deliver in the long run. What are your views on that?
See, there are two elements when you refer to COVID-19. One is the shock element, an unexpected event like a natural disaster which has suddenly hit us. So when an unexpected event sort of hits you, there are two things that can happen. Roosevelt is one president in USA who said whenever you're down and out to declare war, because war is the fastest growing industry. In another way, very tacitly, the fact that we've gone into this uncertainty which has totally shaken us in our boots, and I can't recall any point in history when a tragedy of this nature has actually shaken the entire world. If you talk about the Spanish flu, it affected largely Europe. If you talk about plague, it affected largely UK. If you talk about the world wars, it is largely a European phenomenon. But what happened in COVID-19, it becomes an international phenomenon. So for the first time, we are looking at an earthquake of global proportions. Now this, by itself, resurrects a lot of questions because it automatically tells you what to do. So when you're making decisions, one of the biggest decisions for a business house is to say what to do. How do you look at a strategy? Now the question is not there when it's COVID. You know exactly what to do. Look at the way healthcare is responding. Look at the way vaccines have come in. Look at the way we've learned to use technology to interact with one another, whether it's digital marketing or online teaching, media, publicity, everything has gone online, and these are all huge business ideas. How else do you expect that a minus 7% growth of the economy is expected to suddenly swing towards an 11% growth tomorrow, which is known as the V growth rate, from a fall to an immediate because there are greater opportunities opening up. And business is nothing but creating these opportunities. Decision making is no longer lagging. Many of the so-called erstwhile investments will die. For instance, long tourism. Unless the economy revives, your tourist traffic must be local, and therefore, as to put it in typical government terms, local should get vocal. But tourism has declined. There are many of the industries that you would perhaps require, like travel and transport and even visas to go abroad. All that gets shaken for the time being because unemployment has perhaps increased. But something very good has happened, which we never thought of. For once, people are justifying their existence. When offices were in full swing, we had an 8-hour or 10-hour schedule. But believe you me, I've seen teachers and I know how government works. Hardly 2 hours of dedicated work is put in. The rest is on lunchtime, break time, socializing, meeting people, looking at people who are dropping in, solving problems for students, chatting in the staff room. All that is now through the window. What you've really landed up getting is dedicated, concentrated work from your study, from your home. And I've seen even my children working in offices, working till 10 and 12 at night just to meet their deadlines. So your productivity levels have gone up. So the real reason why the spurt has taken place in the country is thanks to COVID, people have learned to work and to justify why they have a job. It has also given us another lesson. You don't have to set up big offices. You need to have demarcated spaces, and you need to have greater links. So be it the large supplier, the small suppliers, coexistence has now come into play. You're not living in walled cities anymore. You're not living into office areas anymore. The world has truly become your stage, and now you could be selling or inscripting, doing your BPO studies and doing everything just on the internet, again driven by technology. And thank God people have learned to work. And it's the wrong way to justify that they need to retain their job. They've started learning how to work. COVID has done something wonderful. Everybody has now realized that you've got to learn. So when the boat capsizes, people have to swim ashore. If you can't swim ashore, you sink. And therefore, it's good riddance to bad rubbish. Emotionally, you would perhaps say that's not right, but we had far too many parasites and parasitical existence. It sounds inhuman. But on the other hand, when the system was working and thousands, literally millions, I'll give you statistics. 1978, Professor Raj Krishna, who was our teacher in one of the institutes, Delhi School of Economics, he gave a very interesting statistic. He said, every year 6 million youth are reaching working age. And the absorption capacity of your modern sector, which is public and private sector, together. It's not Tatas and Birlas and Ambanis and Adanis. It is they with the Navaratnas. Together, they can absorb only 500,000. So even with 100% growth, 6 minus 1, 5 million will remain unemployed over the year. And when he was saying that in 1978, 83, they did a study and they found in 5 years, 25 million were added to the backlog of 25 million, 50 million people were unemployed. And he said, at this rate, by the turn of the century, 166 million people will be unemployed, which is a 16% unemployment rate. And that's exactly where we are heading now. So your so-called businesses were anyway not a blotting paper absorbing the labor. So where was your labor going? They were getting into and melting into the informal sector. You had a vibrant formal sector, the smart aleck party-going club people, you and me, and you had the others who, in their own way, were selling and peddling their ware on street corners or informally selling but not paying taxes. That is about 85% of your economy in India. Why were they there? Because your system was not able to absorb them. Now, the system is actually saying nobody is absorbable unless you deserve to be absorbed. You'll have to be competent in your own way to justify what can I do with you. So either you have the acumen and the resources to buy a computer and learn technology to be computer savvy, or get down to dirtying your hands and tilling the soil and producing more. So this clear awakening, as it were, the economic awakening to say, don't depend on the government to bail you out. Depend on yourself to say, what can I do? And it's kind of self-awakening. And I think this lesson has been godsend, not just for India, for the whole world at large. What do we do? And that is the biggest question that people were avoiding, because everybody was trying to take the sucker of saying, I have got these degrees, which is pieces of paper, so please pick me up. And if you don't pick me up, then I commit suicide. And we had teaching shops giving these degrees, which makes it more sellable. And we had engineering colleges teaching plasma physics when there is no application. But the same people were migrating to other countries which were actually having a lottery at our expense with the brain drain. You spend money, produce your product, and I'll pinch it out of you. And there was the other class which said, well, I've got these letters, I've got so many degrees, now pick me up. My question is, why should a civil engineer get into an XLRI, learn personal management, and sell soap for Hindustan leaders? He's learned how to make bridges, right? So, something was going totally wrong somewhere. And COVID is one good excuse for us to come to terms with ourselves, which is, what is it that what you are good at? What is it that you can do to survive? And if you're an MBA, why can't you start up? Why are you looking at somebody else to bear your risk and hire you? If you're good and you know, then deliver.
True. So very well, brought forward. You've talked about some of the, important words like coexistence, collaboration. During this COVID period, I consider this as a period of introspection, where people could have made self reflections to understand what went wrong, what could have been done better, and how do we see going ourselves forward. So if people have wasted their time during this COVID, then they have kind of lost the most precious time of self reflection. Now coming to the
I'll give you an example. The largest animals, vertebrates, if you like, were the dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And just a meteor, and all of them vanished. Right? So it's not the largeness that gets you going, it is the uncertainty. And COVID is the uncertainty which has kick-started all activities in the world. And I'm happy it's happened, because there are two things that have happened. One is what you said, introspection. What is it that you want? The second is, if life is so uncertain, what is this great journey of life all about? Enrichment, aggrandizement, getting our lives better, or leaving behind something as an example for others? What am I going to leave behind for the larger people to know?
True.
So when you exit the world, how will people remember you? For the number of bathtubs you had, for the number of cars you had, the number of palaces you had. Alexander asked the same question. You're not going to leave the world with what about you with your wealth. The real wealth is how much did you matter for others? How much would people remember you for?
True.
It needs a Netaji for people to know that this chap actually got nothing when he left the world. We don't even know whether he left the world at all.
Exactly.
But he tried to bring back the country on its own feet, and therefore he's a Netaji. So we have many Netajis now looking up. COVID has helped us do that.
True. So I would like to make an important point here. Dr. Suman. People say necessity is the mother of invention.
Right.
We have seen this COVID period where I would like to make a personal statement, and I'm sure my audience can take this back, and I'm sure you would also agree to that COVID has been the mother of digitization. We have seen this period wherein most of the, since I have worked personally in the wealth management and asset management space, I have seen organizations who had 5 years or 6 years plans of going digital. Now all of that has become all the more sudden, right? So people had to they had some real good hiring plans. Right now, if you see, since we are operating at a world level and things are become pretty more digital, right? So it's not necessary to have more people come over to office, where we have talked about effectiveness and efficiency of people. Right now, we see that people are working flexibly, having longer working hours, and still they are able to deliver it more. Right. So in light of this statement, I'm coming up to the next question for you, Dr. Suman, which is related to workforce. How do you see workforce emerge globally, especially in the corporates, as a result of these changing priorities that we see in the business?
You see, there's a fundamental change in the way we've looked at labor. We've had maybe a few hundred years of exploitation in a kind where somebody thought out a business idea, he got others to work for him, and then realized that because it's his idea, as I referred to the CEO's salary, he decided, well, the profits are mine, I'll give you the right of existence and make it more and more comfortable depending on whether you're my general or you're my supervisor or you're just a lay worker. The auxiliary, the ancillary, the direct operatives, these are the workers we were looking at. Now, deployment or classification of labor of that kind, I think, is going to change. A, because of technology, you referred to digitalization. But if you were in an economy which is isolated from the rest of the world, let's say Nagaland, or an island economy, a Robinson Crusoe economy, what kind of a prescription would you give for that person to exist or that society to exist? So there are two ways of looking at it. I can look at it as a market and say education can now be penetrating the remotest part of the country if I can digitalize it, if I can send my IT into that area. That's assuming there'll be no power failure, there's no Amphan, and there is no earthquakes. But when that happens, then my digital world will also collapse. So the right of survival, even for electricity, look at the wires that we've had. Now we've realized that if energy is what we need, then we need to have solar power. And people, whenever they, as you rightly said, necessity is the mother of invention. From fossil fuels, we are moving into electric cars, we are using solar energy, we are using wind energy, we are using every kind of resource possible.
Thanks to big data and technology.
Yeah, technology. Now, internet is good because even if I have access to it to a neighboring place, I get to know what's the latest. Smartphones can actually help me link. Even if I don't have the computers, I can link to the remotest part of the country. But at the same time, I must be worthy of something. When you're talking about LPG, liberalization, privatization, and globalization, then you're talking about links. You're talking about global links, not just in a production process, or also about how a community can be together to justify itself. And when that happens, in that kind of Robinson Crusoe economy or island economies, you will still find growth because that country will grow only if it can trade. Japan is a developed country because it believes in trading. Australia is a country which is considered developed because it's agro-based. And whoever told you agriculture is not your source of strength. So if you have a large agricultural base, what has happened in the farm bills is the step in the right direction. Why is it the step in the right direction? Last 10 years, 3.45 lakh people committed suicide. And you still have a few million people, 10% of your population, below poverty line, where the poverty line is $1.25 per capita. So when even after 70 years, literally 100 years, you're having people starving, something's going wrong in the whole process of your believing someone else will help me to clear up my mess. If a person does not know how to clear its mess, or limit its wants, or use oneself more productively, we are in for trouble. How did we survive in earlier centuries? I'm going back to the Vedic times. People found a way to defend themselves, live and survive. What took us off our rails? The comparative journey of saying, have we protected ourselves? Has medicine actually helped us? Has HIV been cured? Even common cold today can't be cured. One COVID comes and tells you how flat your science is, how great your medicine is. We've still not been able to tackle cancer. So this inflated ego of man can control everything. On one hand, it can send people to the moon. On the other hand, you can't control common cold. Shows the kind of gap that exists between reality and what you assume to be yourself. There's no point being a gorilla beating our chest and saying we have achieved a lot. In the larger spectrum of life, you have not achieved nothing because the uncertainty remains. So in that context, I do believe not just on COVID, but each individual should learn to be happy in his own way, realize that how you would survive in your own way, why agriculture still makes sense, why producing in excess of your requirement makes sense, because that's the market economy. If others join in, then it can be large scale. If others don't join in, then what the farms bill actually do not address, 85% of your farmers are actually marginal farmers. Then cooperate, get together. Finally, if you look at birds, how do they migrate from colder climates to warmer climates every year? Traveling thousands of miles and then migrating back. How do they do it? They do it by flapping their wings in a V formation. And most important, they honk their approval. They go quack, 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 quack. So without communication, you cannot grow because you're a human agent. You're born to live together. You're born to hold hands together. You need the worker in your household to clean. and you need to recognize he's a brother to you and not your servant. He's in your service, but without him, you'll be hopelessly out of place.
Yeah.
Therefore, like migratory birds, honk approval, get into communication, believe you're one civilization that transgress this world at a given point of time in history, and be together. People, genders, nations, places, all together. It's the march of time.
So
March
very
of
well, talked about when we talk about inclusiveness. Now you've touched upon being together, and when we are talking about most of the economies, right, be it the US or China for that matter, who's been in news since COVID, right? We need to talk about inclusive society. And how do we do that? That depends on how well are we able to first introspect. Again, I come back to square one. But when we talk about businesses in reference to the shifting priorities, I see that people apply the same strategies and expect different results, right? Now, when we're talking about businesses post-COVID, or from here on, so we had an era of pre-COVID era, then we had during the COVID era, and now we see there is post-COVID era. Now, businesses need to rethink, reinvent strategies for kind of making their organizations revenues grow multiples by multiple margins. Now, how can organizations work on rethinking such strategies, especially when we talk about my audience? I'm sure there must be some of the young students, right? I'm sure people have joined in large numbers from across the world, but especially from Calcutta and Mumbai, right, where both of us are located. So I'm sure people must be having some of their own startups also. People have joined in who have been operating some big businesses also. But how is it important for them to re-look at strategies and see that they can have a different result? Because I'm sure with the same kind of strategy and same efforts, we cannot see different results. So what are your views on that?
You've raised a question which is very close to my heart. It's basically a question of what do you understand as greatness? The peculiar journey of human history and civilization is we've looked at greatness in terms of how we've conquered another's spirit, another's competence, another's land, and acquisition has been taken as a part of greatness. What was Alexander the Great? He ran over many territories and acquired wealth. What was the great British colonial empire? They colonized the rest of the world to say you become raw material appendages to our economy and take finished products from us. So it was a kind of servile attitude. So when you're talking about what is the modern things, you're looking at China today, which is actually expanding in an extremely devious manner, trying to capture every part of the world, and they're looking at competing partners, trading partners like India as a threat. So when you do that, your posturing becomes aggressive. Your posturing becomes of acquisition of markets. So if your whole journey is my growth is how much I have conquered, and if your own achievement at personal levels is how many stories is my building, then it raises the question of how have you mattered, the question that I initially raised. Be that as it may, there's a French proverb which said, do you know how the fly climbed to the top of the mountain? And how did it do it? It sort of flew over the wound of a warrior horse, and as the horse climbed the hill, it flew up to the top of the mountain. So it reached the top of the mountain. So while the sun shines, others can make hay. I'll give you very simple examples of what can happen. Of course, we know about online reselling, online teaching, working as a consultant, online bookkeeping, app development, transcription development, freelance copywriting, home care and translation, digital marketing, food trucks, t-shirt printing, drop shipping, and even pet sitting. Excellent. So many activities to keep you going. But are you looking at survival rights? So what looks to be the biggest business house? Who else thought that after the 2008 crisis, JP Morgan would be in the kind of shacks would really be sacking up? So who thought about that? So the large is large only as long as the going is good. But the pop and mom shop still operates and they do good business to survive. So one is coming to terms with your aspirations and your capability to protect yourself and family. The other is the greed of saying and proving to the world that I have arrived. Here I think the whole story comes to something that we don't look at. Maslow's self-actualizing need actually goes through all these 5 rounds. But the most important part is, beyond all this comes educare. Beyond all that is coming into introspection and metaphysical knowledge of why you here, what will happen after you. And the moment you start questioning that, what is this mad rush all about if I'm not going to collect it with a question that Alexander raised when he was dying? The wealth does not go with you. So it's a question that I think has to be raised by all, particularly in the COVID times. It is a rude awakening to the clause that suddenly in 5 days you might die and all that you've done is bequeathed to your heirs or is given to your loved ones, who are actually going to be very happy not to see you come back in spirit, but will like to take your wealth. So if this is the whole story of life, it's better we made our lives much more meaningful. When Swami Vivekananda raised that issue, that as long as a single individual remains hungry in this country, I recognize that every individual who's educated is a traitor. He was striking a point home, very close to the heart of communism. The problem with communism, it's seared in anger. I am poor because you're rich. No, the journey is you be rich because you're better endowed, you're more talented, but you need me, without which you can't grow. So it's cooperation, not just exclusive existence. Which is why Swami Vivekananda comes from a religious fold, not from anguish and anger and aggression, trying to blame the world and society and the richer people to say you're rich because of me. No, he's rich because he's better. He's more capable. But have you made him realize that he needs to hold your hand? And it's in his interest that he holds your hand. So when that happens, it's a spiritual awakening. And if there is no spiritual awakening, especially after COVID, there's no lessons learned.
True. Just to, touch upon the statements that you've mentioned, you talked about spiritual awakening, which is very quintessential going forward. What I see is there is a lack of appreciation that we make in our day-to-day dealings with people, be it personally or professionally. Sometimes we think that appreciating people will, lower down our value. But sometimes we need to remember that if we need to live in a society which is inclusive in nature, we need to tell people good is good and bad is bad. Right? We need to tell people what's right in the interest of them and more so for the society. Right? You've touched beautifully on how together as a society we could talk about. You spoke about some of the technology and digitization processes. Right? Now, being from a wealth tech background, I want tell my audience that in these COVID times, we have seen a lot of companies emerge as a result of education industry being ed tech, right? We see wealth management companies taking the wealth tech route, right? So when we talk about ed tech or the wealth tech companies, these are seeing a major boom going forward. So how do you see India, who has been a global powerhouse in some of the most important sectors? And when we talk about special economies like, the most developed economy of the world, right, USA, where most of the Indian people, I'm sure because you have been a part of the US, education system, that Indians are widely recognized in the US for their talent, their IT skills, and they are there all over. And when we talk about some of the top companies of the world, you have Indians as the CXOs leading those organizations. So what are your views going forward once we have seen that everything has come to normal, right? I'm not sure how soon are we going to enter into normalcy, but the vaccination drive has already started across the world. But I'm sure it's going to take some months as we, kind of enter into pure normalcy. But what are your views on the statement?
Raised several questions in one. For instance, you said good is good and bad is bad, but the question is, I'm still not sure what is good. That's something that we've taken as given. I think if you're going to really move forward as a civilization, as a human race, then it's time we realize that it's through togetherness, a united world, an international world, not really broken down in narrow boundaries of nationalities, but about international thought about saying we traverse the world together as a human race. Regardless of your color of skin, regardless of the features that you have, the fact is the blood groups are A minus, AB, B plus, O. So that shows there is a certain common bond amongst human races. That's why we are human races. But we still have boundaries. And when you're talking about goodness, the single most important thing that humanity needs today is not IQ, but EQ, empathy. Because without that, there is no communication possible. The example of good and bad. Some people feel that they are holy because they are vegetarians. And non-vegetarianism is cruel because you kill. You haven't even gone to sermonizing what you should eat and what you should not eat. But try to preach this kind of knowledge to an Eskimo. Go and tell him that you should be eating cabbages when actually his land is fully frosted. For him, the only existence can be to eat animal fat. So it's whale or seal. So vegetarianism makes no sense to him. Do we have the empathetical eye to understand a person's point? That comes to vegetarianism, non-vegetarianism. The religious fundamental problems that are taking place. For heaven's sake, your belief is a personal one. Your faith is a personal one. Keep it in yourself. Religion is realization. Have a faith that only shows that you are mine. But don't bring it out to propound it to others. And don't try to browbeat others to say that my religion is more important than yours. My form of dressing is better than yours. My mother is actually more loving than your mother. How can you prove these points?
True.
And to have political privileges given because of your faith, it's disgusting. It's just unacceptable. If civilization has to move forward, there's only one thing: human kindness. Human kindness and empathy. And unless that's happening, we move as a race, we rise as a flock, we tackle our problems together. Disaster is not your disaster, it's my disaster, because the species will go off. Why are we interested in protecting the rare birds, the rare species? Because we believe in diversity. We believe in sustainability. We believe in a purer world. So many good things. So,
Dr. Suman, at this point, I'm reminded by the lines of Rabindranath Tagore, where he said, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls. So these words carry immense weightage when he wrote these lines, many years back, and that is still relevant in today's context, where we talk about diversity, we talk about inclusivity, right? And these are some of the areas where, as a society, as an Indian community, we tend to forget or tend to lack when we see ourselves compared to the other emerged or the developed economies of the world. So these are, I'm sure, areas where we need to work collaboratively. So you did speak about working collaborated, that too in organizations, institutions, because there's nothing. If people believe that you can travel the path all alone, you may not be able to go far. You may be able to go to a specific, you may be reaching to a specific destination, which is, momentary in nature. But there has to be an end aim or an end goal, which you cannot reach alone. You can reach by virtue of togetherness, right?
You gave Rabindranath. I'd like to also bring in something else if you have the time,
Sure, definitely.
Talk about sustainability. Everything is there in a culture or a civilization which has been long enough. Today we are talking about sustainability. How many of us understand that cosmic growth, which actually comes from the worship of the lingam, which is not even an idol, is just Shiva lingam. And when we pray the Shiva lingam, which is eternal growth, cosmic growth, continuation of life, and the 8 elements are worshipped. To put it more succinctly, Sharvaya Khitimuttaya Namo, Bhavaya Jalamurtaya Namo, Rudraya Ognimurtaya Namo, Ugraya Vayumurtaya Namo, Bhimaya Akashamurtaya Namo, Pashupati Yajmanamurtaya Namo, Ishanaya Surjamurtaya Namo, Mahadeva Somamurtaya Namo. What does it mean? If you take care of your elements, you will have a tranquil world. Shiva, the cosmic growth, will take place. You touch any of these elements, you will have the thunder. It's there in your scriptures. So why don't we read from one another? The Chinese, the Egyptian, the Greek, the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Quranic principles. Every religion gives you how to behave, how to cohabit. No religion tells you kill, annihilate because you are the only right. They came in different parts in society, different times of history. They gave you the logbook of saying, how to live, how to behave, how to cohabit. They made them issues of fights rather than a collaborative journey of saying, get together your act, because there is a force that wants you to get yourself together.
So audience, Dr. Suman has made some remarkable, insights for a lot of questions. I'm sure you also must be having a lot of questions which you need to ask about, how businesses have changed, how businesses are being seen evolving in specific industries. Maybe if you're a startup, you may have a set of questions in mind. You may drop in some of your questions in the Q&A box, because now we are entering another segment of the talk show, which is the rapid fire round, and it's going to be the world is talking style. So for this, Dr. Suman, I want you to be ready, because here, just to give you a quick background about this segment, it's going to be real quick. You need to answer either in just one word, or you need to just pick up one option, and we have to make it real quick, so that there's no time to think, and that too on a live show. So moving on to
the best that I can.
Sure, definitely. I'm sure, because knowing you, that'll come off very naturally to you. So moving on to the very first question of the rapid fire segment. Dr. Suman, who is the one leader you have always looked up to?
Swami Vivekananda.
Great. That sounds good. How digitally ready is India on a scale of 1 to 10, and why? And why has to be in one word?
4. Because the larger part of India is through rural India, where 60% of your population lives, and we have not penetrated.
Great. Moving on to the next question, Dr. Suman. What matters to you the most? Is it efforts or outcomes?
Efforts.
The next question. 3 key learnings you have picked up from your colleagues where you have worked in the education industry.
Sorry, would you repeat that again?
Sure. So 3 key learnings you have picked up from your colleagues in the education industry.
Reading, researching, and communicating.
Lovely, lovely. All of that makes sense because I'm sure the audience will also understand how imperative reading is, and that too, even when you're talking about the education industry, doing research is equally important. Moving on to the next question, Dr. Suman, one thing that makes you very passionate about your work.
Commitment.
Lovely.
Loyalty to your job.
Super. Loyalty is something which is very important and without which most of the businesses collapse. Moving on to the next question. Are you a morning or a night person? How do you describe yourself? Is it a morning person or a night person who is Dr. Suman Mukerjee?
I'm a night person. I think at night. I perform in the morning.
Lovely. Moving on to the next one. Describe yourself in just 3 words.
Honest, simple, loving.
Oh my God, the last one is very emotional because I'm sure your students will relate to that, who you have worked with in different parts of the country, be it Delhi or Calcutta. People know you very well. So I'm sure you are too loving because I have known you personally and you have been a key mentor in my life. So yes, I agree to that. Moving on to the next one. If you could get yourself anything in the world, what would that be?
I'd like to get a united world.
Sorry?
I'd like a united world. I think
Lovely.
we do not have ambassadors enough for that.
Great. For that, we need to start working collaboratively. And I have the next one, which is if you could, see as some of your favorite books, you can tell us one favorite book which you have read throughout your life and which you would want to recommend to my audience.
Certainly the best book I have read, very simple for others, not a tough one. Lectures from Colombo to Almora by Swami Vivekananda.
Lovely. So that's a book by Swami Vivekananda, my audience. If you want to have a glimpse of that book, please go to the internet and I'm sure you will be greatly benefited because Dr. Suman Mukerjee is a figure who believes in, reading some of the most renowned philosophical minds, and that too when we talk about Swami Vivekananda, who has played a key role in India's development for that matter, and who has brought immense glory not just to India but to the world when he represented India at the US in Chicago. Moving on to the next question, which is going to be very interesting, Dr. Suman. You need to put this the words in order of priority. So I'll give you a few words. You need to just remember them and tell them in which order of priority do you see. First is success.
Right.
Next is leadership. Third is mentoring.
Okay.
Fourth is efforts. And fifth is giving back. So I repeat for my audience right now, it's success, leadership, mentoring, efforts, and giving back. So put in order of priority, Dr. Suman. Audience, you will have the answer from Dr. Suman right now.
Efforts.
Okay.
Giving back. Mentorship.
Okay.
Success.
About leadership.
I would rate the most important activity to be effort.
Great. So that's for the audience to take back. How important efforts is. When we talk about not just businesses but in personal life as well. When you're investing in personal relationships, efforts are important. Right. Now, moving on to the next question. Dr. Suman, you need to come up with one word for some of the words which I'll tell you, right? One is communication, one word for communication.
Empathy.
COVID-19,
Lesson.
work from home,
The best alternative.
lovely. Students,
Future of tomorrow.
oh my God, that's amazing. Life after COVID-19,
Wonderful.
oh my God. So we don't see a lot of hardships in the COVID-19 period. I'm sure people would agree that there have been losses of jobs, businesses getting shut down, markets being volatile. All of this has happened. But yes, as you talked about during the show today, that there has been a lot of good that has happened.
Death is immortality. So don't fear death.
Yes, that is something which we are uncertain. I mean, we don't know how and when it's going to strike us. So, I mean, let's just go with the best, go with the flow. And I'm sure my audience who has joined us today will understand the importance of this topic. Moving on to the last question, which I've kept, this is not part of the rapid fire round, but yes, this is going to be, an answer which my audience would want to know from you to take back home after this event would have ended today. The question is, Dr. Suman, being a vintage in the professional speaking community, how important it is for organizations to communicate with passion and confidence, both internally and externally. So this is something which is close to your heart, and I'm sure you would be the best person to answer for how communication plays a vital role, not just in organizations, but also in personal lives.
Communication, I think, is the hallmark of civilization. Whenever you are unable to communicate your decisions, your thoughts, your aspirations properly, there is strife. Be it demonetization, GST implementation, or the farmers' bills. What the government has failed, in spite of this being the right thing, or for that matter, even the North-South dialogue, it is lack of communication.
Great. So there's a question that has come up in the chat box, Dr. Suman, and for that matter, I would want you to answer that for one of my audience who says, how do we develop an efficient work environment that helps us to focus on the growth of the company? So how is it that we can develop efficiency in an organization?
Be very unsparing to yourself, become an example, and burn yourself like a candle for others to be enlightened.
Yeah, that's exactly, could not have been summed up, better than this, because I know for sure that the statements that you make are really straight out from the heart. Moving on to the next question from the audience who said, how can the youth change the economic condition of India?
Firstly, they must have a sense of self-respect. The Mecca of happiness is never outside your shores. If you've not made enough difference to your family, it starts as small as that, to your community, to your state, to your nation, you wouldn't therefore make any difference to the world. It starts, charity begins at home. So youth has a tremendous responsibility of being torch bearers of what they think they want. It's their world, and they must unite to see that they get the world through dialogue, through communication, through exchange of ideas, and bound with love, not hatred.
You echoed a very beautiful sentiment by Mother Teresa that charity begins at home, So it's very important that for youth to start off and to dream of doing big for the society, there has to be baby steps which needs to be taken at the personal level, and then as you said, with having self-respect as a priority, because what you do will determine what's going to be the result, not just for yourself but for people who are connected to you, professionally or personally. There's a question that has come up what about boundaries when you work from home? I'm sure there's a lot of limitations when people work in a remote environment, and it's difficult for people to maintain consistency because there's a lot of distractions in terms of family outings or some of the other distraction that keeps us not 100% dedicated to our work. So how about setting such boundaries when you're working remotely, Dr. Suman? So one of my audience has asked this to you.
I think the whole story is having time management and having a routine in life and trying to stick to that. Whether it's an ashram or the army, you'll find that they set a routine. A person who does not have a routine and does things off the cuff is bound to go astray. You can't react to external stimuli. You must have a mind of your own and be steadfast in trying to hold on to that line. So the only way a person can stick to things is have a time management, have a routine, and strictly follow it.
Lovely. So I'll just add on to that. I've been a very avid reader, and also I've followed very closely some of the world, global speakers, including Robin Sharma, right, who always echoed this sentiment that when you wake up in the morning, you need to be writing journals, right? And I'm sure, Dr. Suman, you must have also followed the practice of, kind of dedicating your early mornings to self-development or writing down few of the important highlights of the day which you are going to accomplish, or in case if you're not able to, at least sit back at night for say 10 or 15 minutes and understand, self-reflect what's happened during the day and what could be better the next day. So I see that some sort of introspection is also needed to keep oneself going, right?
Right. Three good habits. First, learn to write a page in your diary of how the day went. Then gives you a chance of knowing how you wasted the day or used it productively hour by hour. What did you do the whole hour? So you start coming to terms with yourself on, did I spend it right? Your writing should be late at night. I do it that way because you revisit that in the morning to see whether it makes sense. And in between, the first thing in the morning is enjoy nature. Go and take a walk or sit in the veranda and look at the neighbor's garden if you don't have one, or look at the sky to see its pristine glory. Meditate, which is come to terms with yourself. Then reflect on the work you did last night to let it sink in. And I think you're set for the day.
Very beautifully summed up, Dr. Suman. And it was really a pleasure having you with us on the World is Talking show today. A lot of people have joined us on this show, and not just on Zoom. This live event is also being broadcasted simultaneously on the Facebook official page of Inspirectuals. So I'm really thankful to the people who have tuned into the show. But let me also tell you, with this, we have come to the end of the third episode of The World is Talking. But let me also tell you that we are going to be back with the fourth episode of The World is Talking with none other than Miss Brenda Bernstein, who will be joining us live from New York City. And just to share with you, she is an executive resume writer and a LinkedIn expert who will be joining us and sharing insights on social intelligence and networking, which are tried and tested allies. So a topic which is very important and concerning the society at the world level. I would like Dr. Suman to again tune in and join us if you could during that day. I would really love to have you. And I'm sorry?
May I?
Yes.
I'll put my 5 fingers together. This is the typical Indian style. All my 5 senses. And use my thumb to touch my heart to say Namaste. I salute the soul in you. That's not just for you, Chahat, to all the viewers to say I salute the soul that resides in your body. And
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Suman. This was a lovely session with you. My audience has thoroughly enjoyed it. Audience, if you have some of the last minute questions to ask Dr. Suman, please drop in the Q&A box. We'll just wait for another minute to have any last minute questions, because this is a once in a time opportunity to have Dr. Suman with us, because he's too hard to get. If you see him, he keeps appearing on the regional and national news channels on some of the important topics concerning the society. So, I mean, it was our privilege to have you with us today.
My privilege too, to share my thoughts. Thanks.
Yeah, and just to share, since we've come to the end of this event, Dr. Suman has been my mentor when I was in my graduate college in Calcutta. I started getting response from the people who started saying it's an excellent program. CMA Arundhati Basu, thank you so much for your response. I'm sure a lot of people, they have got some insights regarding the business priorities. Most importantly, you've touched upon spiritualism, which is very, very important for people to start reflecting upon, because this is one such topic where people either forget or they lay less focus on. So thank you so much, audience, for joining in. There's a last question which has come up, and we'll take up this as the last question, which is, if COVID wasn't there, what are the changes you would have made in your life, sir? So this is for Dr. Suman specifically.
It would have been a very hackneyed life. I think life was getting boring. You need a shake-up, and when everything gets shaken up, you have another pattern in the kaleidoscope, which is always beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm just to add on to that, very recently you talked about shake-up, and that's the shake-up of the economies around the world, right? So very recently I wrote an article on a digital shake-up, which is where I worked in the wealth management space, and where I talked about how we have shifted from assets under management to assets under intelligence. That's how we are changing and moving on to a really intelligent world, or a digitally equipped world. But are we ready is the bigger question. Are we ready as individuals is the more important question for people to think. So thank you, Dr. Suman. It was really a pleasure having you. Thanks, audience, for joining in. I'll see you on the other side at the 4th episode of The World is Talking. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.